Everyone has put Russia in its place. China is abandoning Putin and turning to Trump. Beijing is preparing a major deal with the US, leaving the Kremlin in complete isolation. The world is on the brink of a geopolitical earthquake. Even those who just yesterday swore friendship to Moscow are now turning their backs. Asia has given the Kremlin a kick. Putin's empire is crumbling before our eyes. Central Asia and the Caucasus are massively breaking free from Russian influence. Thank you. Forming new alliances with China, Turkey, the EU, and even the US. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan has shattered the Kremlin's illusions. Tokayev has delivered an unthinkable blow to Putin's back. Allies are fleeing, the empire is collapsing, the world's second army is sinking, and Ukraine is becoming a symbol of strength and truth. I'm Zorislava Kolesnikova, and this is Ukraine Today. Stay with us to witness the collapse of the Russian state with your own eyes. China is abandoning Putin and turning to Trump. The world stands on the brink of a new geopolitical upheaval. Beijing is preparing for a major deal with the US, leaving the Kremlin alone with war, sanctions, and economic collapse. Donald Trump has confirmed that he may visit China at the beginning of 2026, but a meeting with Xi Jinping could happen even earlier, as soon as late October in South Korea. The main goal is to avoid a trade war that could destroy the global economy.
In the end, the United States will have a fantastic trade agreement with China, beneficial for both countries and the world.
Starting from December 1st, 2025, any companies connected to foreign defense industries will no longer be able to obtain licenses to export rare earth elements from China. This is a colossal blow to the US, the EU, and their allies, but it's also a clear signal to Moscow. Beijing no longer sees it as a partner, but only as a burden. In response, Trump threatened 100% tariffs on all Chinese exports. However, for Beijing, this is no longer a problem. China is betting on new rules of the game, where the US is not the main rival, but a potential strategic partner. And Russia is an outdated satellite, doomed to isolation. China is abandoning the Kremlin and preparing a new alliance with the US. While Putin dreams of turning to the east, Beijing is already looking to the west. That's where the money, technology, and the future are headed. China has chosen a side. Beijing has officially declared that it's time to end the war and reach a fair peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. A global sensation, the country long considered a quiet ally of the Kremlin is now speaking the language of peace, not weapons. At a briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Geng Shuang clearly outlined Beijing's position while commenting on the joint statement by the leaders of Ukraine, the EU, and US President Donald Trump in support of the initiative for an immediate ceasefire.
China's position on the Ukrainian crisis is consistent and clear.
China insists only negotiations, only peace. Beijing calls for a political settlement and supports a peace plan based on the current line of contact, effectively backing Washington's initiative.
We hope that the relevant parties will reach a just and lasting peace agreement, which will be binding and acceptable to all involved parties through dialogue and consultations.
And although China continues to declare neutrality and avoids naming the aggressor, its rhetoric has changed sharply. After 3 years of silent support for Moscow, Beijing is beginning to distance itself from the aggressor country. Previously, China actively developed economic and diplomatic ties with Russia, but now it is demonstratively stepping out of the Kremlin's shadow. The Chinese government rejects accusations of aiding Moscow and emphasizes that the ties between the countries are merely ordinary cooperation, not support for the war. The world is witnessing a shift that could change the course of history. China is no longer staying silent. It advocates for a political solution to the war, not for the continuation of the Kremlin's bloody ambitions. After years of balancing, Beijing is making its move. And it seems this move is not in Russia's favor. Asia has also given the Kremlin a kick. The Russian world is coming apart at the seams, and Putin's empire is crumbling right before our eyes. The Kremlin is losing its last footholds as the countries of Central Asia and the Caucasus are massively breaking away from its influence, forging new alliances with China, Turkey, the EU, and even the USA. After the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the region that was once called a zone of Russian control is completely changing its course. Thank you. Kazakhstan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and even Tajikistan are no longer willing to live under Moscow's dictate. The director of the Carnegie Russia-Eurasia Center, Alexander Gabuev, notes,
"The turn away from Moscow is driven by fear.
Putin, in desperation, arrived in Tajikistan for 2 summits of former Soviet states, an attempt to maintain the illusion of control. But behind the scenes of strong ties lies a cold reality. One by one, the region's leaders are distancing themselves from the Kremlin. Meanwhile, China is definitively pushing Russia out of the region. Beijing has already become the largest trading partner of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, investing billions in transport, energy, and industry. Giovanni Salvetti, head of the CIS region at Rothschild & Co Bank, notes,
Russia is now much less visible in Uzbekistan. The Chinese are readily filling this void.
The European Union is not standing aside either. In April, it signed a strategic agreement with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. The EU is investing up to 12 billion euros in the development of transport routes, energy, and the extraction of critical minerals. The Kremlin is no longer a center of power. It is turning into a shadow of the past. While Putin begs for unity, Asia is building a new world without Moscow, without empires, and without the Russian world. The Russian world. A sensational turn from China, which for years had shielded Moscow on the international stage, is now betting on the West and the US, leaving Putin with his limitless partnership in political isolation. World leaders have witnessed the public humiliation of the Kremlin. Xi Jinping didn't even mention Russia among his strategic partners. Meanwhile, Trump and Washington are negotiating a new global deal with Beijing. The first details of the Kremlin's humiliation. Watch right now.
China is Russia's main partner, helping it keep its economy afloat and wage war in Ukraine. They shouted that China is great. China is great, hooray for China. In Chinese,
I am now carefully beginning with the patrol of the right side. Contacts with President Vladimir Putin in the smartest forms for the benefit of the dynamic and long-term development of Chinese-Russian relations.
but is it really so? After all, at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia, and Chinese banks have stopped transactions with Russia due to sanctions.
Pairs, threes, tens of millions of Chinese soldiers. Right now, that's exactly what's needed.
And why do you
think so?
Why not?
Why?
Do you think only soldiers should die?
I look at the Belgorod region and think how much we truly lack the Chinese army.
Very often we hear statements from China that China has never sold weapons to Russia and that China supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine and wants an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Just 3 years ago, propagandists were triumphant. They said, let Western companies leave, we'll just buy everything from here.
China is a large country located in East Asia. It is known for its vast population, rich cultural heritage, and long history. I bought myself 3 pairs of Gucci shoes, 2,000 hryvnias each. Wonderful. Probably made somewhere in China too, or hopefully here as well. A knockoff, of course. Now I buy them on principle. Only knockoffs.
What came of it doesn't even need to be commented on. That same Chinese support for the Russian economy resulted in the bankruptcy of Russian manufacturers.
And just look at what, for example, the soldiers are driving. What, Russian-made cars, right? You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot. Because it costs a fortune. It breaks down all the time, and the spare parts are insanely expensive. That's why the guys drive Chinese vehicles. And now they need motorcycles. Russian ones? No. For some reason, there aren't many Russian ones.
There aren't any Russian ones.
What are we even talking about?
No Russian motorcycles. So what then?
You
don't know, do you?
If you look at the economic aspects of this issue, the Russian Federation is simply used as an ordinary market. A loss. As for what isn't part of, let's say, the military industry, civilian engineering is practically, as they say, reduced to zero.
And Russia has literally turned into a raw materials appendage for China. By the way, a very apt one. The head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Lavrov, came up with a metaphor calling Putin Xi Jinping's donkey.
As they say in the East, the guest is the donkey, the host. That's why all the programs, of course, depend on those gracious proposals that the Chinese president and his team made to our president. From
a broader perspective, all China really needs from an economic standpoint is cheap raw materials, which, by the way, Russia has in abundance. It's not just gas and oil, but also lithium, timber, and quite valuable metals, as well as gold. In other words, everything that is then used in China itself to manufacture goods for the whole world.
Moreover, this situation manifests itself in completely different aspects. In China, new official geographic maps have been approved, where certain parts of Russian territory, for example, Bolshoi-Ussuriski Island, are recognized as Chinese territory. In fact, the Chinese have already settled vast areas of Siberia and turned the territory into their own colonies.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay within its own country, simply because it has historical claims that extend to a significant part of our Far East. And that's a fact.
Of course, at first, there was enthusiasm, but it gradually faded, and as a result, we all realized that Asina had become a Chinese colony. It's simply a slave-owning enterprise. Slave-owning or a prison, call it what you want, where overseers are put in place to keep the workers in check. Because in any case, this is still being acknowledged. And the workers went out in Asina for a protest called Asina is not China. And they also they regularly threaten that you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this city. Here's your black mark. So sit quietly and keep your mouth shut for your 15 to 30,000.
They are very good at waiting. And this ability to wait, it's also about the integration of Chinese people into the territory of the Russian Federation. This is already, by and large, in fact, an annexation. Even more so if you pay attention to Chinese maps where Chinese names are already being written. Well, listen, why do we need to talk about the war for this?
On Russian TV, they are already showing videos about how to find a Chinese husband, and in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese language is being actively studied.
He 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 he. We are mobile songs, meaning we bring music that moves with you, so you can listen to your favorite tunes wherever you are, right from your mobile device.
It is divided into two camps. Those who want to learn and those who are skeptical about it and say, why do we need Chinese? We're not planning to go anywhere. I answer them very simply, actually. I tell them, I'm not teaching you Chinese here, but using the Chinese language to make you think, to use your head. And this is a skill that always prepares you.
Putin constantly tries to characterize relations with China as a strong friendship. But China's Xi Jinping literally spat in Putin's face by taking away from Russia that very great
You get it, right? You understand what I mean, do you? But I couldn't resist, I ate a second one. It was delicious.
China and Russia, being the main theaters of military action in World War II, contributed to the victory over fascism. And in doing so, they laid the cornerstone for the post-war world order.
China and Russia are neither friends nor partners, and this is important. As soon as China has enough motivation to maintain its cooperation with the Russian Federation, believe me, it will do so. Russia, in fact, has no choice at all. Either be friends with China now or face economic collapse and, as a consequence, political, military, and all other collapses at the same time.
So it turns out that China is not helping Russia save its economy or win the war at all. It's simply taking advantage of Russia's weakness to seize its resources and strengthen its own influence in Asia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now. Kazakhstan also did not stay by the Kremlin's side. Tokayev did the unthinkable, a stab in the back to Putin. Moscow is in shock. The Brotherhood is falling apart right before our eyes. The alliance with Russia is dead. Instead of support, the Kremlin received a cold break and a demonstrative refusal to play by Moscow's rules. Putin is begging for loyalty, but it's already too late. The empire is crumbling, allies are fleeing, and Ukraine is gaining strength. Everything about the Kremlin's loud betrayal, the geopolitical rift, and how Kazakhstan crossed out the Russian world. Watch right now.
The president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the president of Kazakhstan, Tokayev, met in New York for the first time since 2019. On the sidelines of the UN Assembly, Tokayev stated that it was time to sit down at the negotiating table, although he did not directly condemn Russia.
Kazakhstan remains concerned about the crisis around Ukraine, which continues to inflict serious losses on citizens, undermine global trust, and worsen international security. Therefore, bilateral and international diplomatic efforts to resolve this conflict must continue.
Kazakhstan appears to maintain neutrality on the issue of the Russian-Ukrainian war and offers its mediation services.
Kazakhstan initially offered its services as a possible mediator or as a venue for negotiations between the two opposing sides. This position has not changed.
But as they say, the devil is in the details. And there are many details in Kazakhstan's relations with both Russia and Ukraine. For example, Kazakhstan refused to cooperate with Moscow on building a nuclear power plant. China will build them. Also, according to the Kazakh authorities, they are preventing Russia from circumventing Western.
Tracking products or goods, easily online tracking of goods, including the creation of a specialized website where you can check whether a particular company or product is on the sanctions list at traderradar.kz. I think all our exporters are aware of this and accordingly comply with it.
And President Tokayev stated that he does not recognize the legitimacy of the so-called LNR and DNR.
We do not recognize Taiwan, Kosovo, South Abkhazia, South Ossetia, or Abkhazia as independent states or sovereign entities. And apparently, this principle of non-recognition will be applied as a matter of policy to quasi-state territories as well, which, in our view and according to our official position, include the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. This approach reflects our consistent stance on matters of international recognition and territorial integrity.
Of course, Russian politicians and propagandists cannot tolerate such audacity and regularly threaten Kazakhstan with war, making the same claims as they did about Ukraine, alleging that it is supposedly originally Russian territory.
If we don't resolve the issue with Ukraine, then we'll end up having problems with Kazakhstan, Armenia, and other countries that surround us. With Kazakhstan too, you think? Well, of course. Why? Well, just look at what's happening in Kazakhstan today in terms of, so to speak, building up a kind of a Kazakh state where a national mythology about independence is flourishing, about switching to the Latin alphabet. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there if you look closely.
The situation in Ukraine is clearly reflected in Kazakhstan. There are also large regions there populated by Russian speakers.
Some people in Kazakhstan believe that in the future we want to take their land following the Ukrainian scenario, northern Kazakhstan. What do you think? Did we ever have such plans? Are we counting on that?
I believe that we have historical rights to these lands. This is an industrial region. These are cities that were built by our ancestors. Why did we give them away in '91? On what basis?
Because of this, Kazakhstan created a list of Russian citizens who are banned from entering Ukraine. This list includes about a dozen deputies of the Russian State Duma, as well as the notorious Tina Kandelaki, the ideologist of the Russian world Dugin, and the late husband of propagandist Simonyan.
Kazakhs, dear brothers, what kind of ingratitude is this? Look at Ukraine. Think seriously. If you truly believe you can keep being so cunning and get away with it, you will regret it.
President Zelensky has repeatedly stated, citing intelligence data, that Russia has military plans for Kazakhstan.
So the information we received is that among their priorities are the Baltic countries, Moldova, and Kazakhstan. These are the closest targets of the Russian Federation.
The president of Kazakhstan stated that he would put an end to attempts at separatism, and Kazakh deputies went even further by making claims to territories that are currently part of Russia.
We, as responsible citizens, must oppose any manifestations of radicalism, extremism, and separatism, be both delicate and at the same time firm, and ultimately...
It should be understood that Novosibirsk is not Novosibirsk, but Novaya Sibir. These are our Kazakh territories. Tyumen is the southern land of the Golden Horde. that is even beyond Tyumen, those are also our territories. Orenburg is not Orenburg, but Orenburg. And at one time it was the capital of the Kazakh state.
There was also a lot of different information from intelligence. For example, that Putin demanded Tokayev supply weapons for the war with Ukraine, and after Ukrainian drone attacks on oil refineries, he was begging Kazakhstan for gasoline. At the same time, Putin constantly humiliatingly mixes up Tokayev's patronymic and apparently does it
on purpose. Kamyanets entered, and esteemed Kasim Jaman Kamyanets, that is truly how I see you. So esteemed Kasim Jaman Kamyanets said it's about 27 billion. Esteemed with the utmost respect. Kamyanets. Kasim Jaman Kamyanets.
Putin's plan was to draw Kazakhstan into the so-called Union State, following the example of Belarus, but he failed. Tokayev only mocks such proposals.
Just recently, the President of the Republic of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, suggested that Kazakhstan join the Union State. I appreciated the joke appropriately. I think there is no need for this, since there are already integration associations, first and foremost, the Eurasian Economic Union. As for nuclear weapons, we don't need them.
Even those who seemed to be Russia's closest allies understand that it's impossible to trust terrorists and murderers. That's why it's necessary to keep them at a distance and, if possible, support those who oppose them.
Friends, the world is changing before our very eyes. Kremlin's allies are fleeing one after another, and the Russian world is falling apart at the seams. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and write in the comments whether you believe this is already the beginning of the end for Putin's empire. Things are going to get even louder, so stay with us.